Hello, I'm Rebecca Flaherty, and in this tutorial you're going to learn how to make diamond repeat seamless patterns in Procreate using my Pattern Maker canvas and brush set. This video is actually a 2.0 version of my original how-to video that I made back in 2023. I wanted to make a new, clearer version of it because some of the sketches in that one were a little bit hard to see. You asked and I listened, so here it is. Okay, so first things first, what is a diamond repeat? The concept behind this method is simple. Instead of using a standard square repeat, we rotate the square 45 degrees and repeat it from that angle. This creates what we call a diamond repeat. Your tile will still work within a traditional grid repeat system, but it includes a built-in mini diamond structure, similar to a half drop layout. You'll be drawing these parts in the middle diamond, and then using them to fill in the areas around the outside. Why use the diamond method? Well, a major benefit of this technique is that all the seams are visible within the Procreate canvas. With a traditional grid repeat tile in Procreate, you can't see past the edges of the canvas like you can in other design software. But when we use a diamond repeat, we can see all of our seams and how each motif interacts with what is around it on the next tile along. Using a diamond repeat means you only need to illustrate around half the motifs on your tile, so it's great for getting the most out of your creative time. You only need to illustrate the motifs within the centre area. These on the outside are simply duplicated. I also love how this method lets you refine and customise your sketch layer before finalising motifs. This means that you only draw the exact motif you need, which is another big time saver. I first learned to make patterns by drawing a bunch of finished motifs and then piecing them together like a jigsaw. Inevitably, I'd end up not using all of them, some parts didn't fit, and there was always a missing piece. The workflow that I'm going to show you gets the layout sorted first with rough sketches. You can draw intuitively and tailor each motif to fit its space rather than trying to piece a jigsaw of elements together. Another big reason that I love this method is it keeps your images at perfect resolution. I love using texture brushes to draw with, but in Procreate, every time that you duplicate and either rotate or resize part of an illustration, you lose a little image quality. Your crispy textured line becomes soft and fuzzy. This isn't great for print quality, and it would mean that you have some motifs in your pattern nice and crisp, and then others would be fuzzy. Not a good look. Sketching first means you can resize and rotate to your heart's content in the messy sketch layer, and then once you have your layout sorted, you can draw everything in its final position, knowing that everything is perfect image quality and all of the motifs match. Lastly, this is a non-destructive workflow, meaning you always have a set of full layers to go back to if you ever need to make edits or change colours. We only flatten a copy of our motifs at the very end to build out our tile, and it's very easy to go back and make edits or corrections and then make a new version of the tile. Because all of your layer structure is maintained, this also makes it a suitable way of making patterns that you might want to license and your buyer wants a layered format. Okay, so hopefully now I've sold you on why this is a great way to make patterns. Let's get started and learn how to make a simple floral pattern. So start in your Procreate gallery, tap on Import, and find wherever you've got your downloaded copy of the Pattern Maker canvas saved. I've added mine to favourites down here so I can easily find it. And it's this one here, Pattern Maker Canvas Updated, that we're going to use. If you've got a smaller or older iPad which can't handle as many layers, you could use the 8-inch file if you wanted, as the file size for that one is a bit smaller. You might be used to seeing Procreate files ending in .procreate and not .psd, which is of course a Photoshop file format. But you can still use these PSD files in Procreate, and you should know that once you open these PSD files in Procreate, you can then save them and export them as .procreate files if you want to. Once you've pulled them down as PSD files, having them in Procreate automatically makes them a Procreate file. So we're going to go for this one here. So let's have a look at the file structure. We've got all our textures up here, and then we open up our layers folder. We've got an extra group, a pattern group, and a sketch group, and that's where we're going to start working. We're going to start on this draw here first layer, which is an empty layer, and then underneath we have this transparent diamond layer. So tap on this layer, just grab the palette I'm going to use for this pattern, and we'll just start with this dark colour here. Normally I use this fun sketcher brush for doing all my sketching, but as I discovered when I made the first version of this video, this doesn't show up very well on camera, so I will use the colouring crayon for this one. So we're going to start off on this layer, the draw here first layer, and we're just going to draw our first motif on. So I'm going to draw the flower stalks in, and for the flower shapes, I'm not going to get too bogged down with details at this stage. I'm just going to draw circles where I know that I'm going to put the flower shapes eventually, but circles will do for now just as placeholders. And then add a few leaves in. Might make that a little bit smaller. And then I'm going to tap transform, turn snapping and magnetics off for this part, and I just want to drag this up to the top. And I normally start with the first one up at the top of the canvas so that I've got lots of space around the outside for adding the next motif in. So you can see this crosses this edge of the tile there, which means it's also going to be down there. For drawing the next piece in there, it would be useful if we have this in already. So I'm going to merge this down with the sketch diamond, duplicate, tap transform. I'm going to put snapping and magnetics back on again now, and then I'm going to snap this over to this side. And you'll see orange lines where it snaps to the edges of the canvas, and then I'm going to drag it down here and into this corner. You'll see orange lines, orange lines down there, and also crossing in the middle of the canvas, and that shows you that it's in the right place. You can also zoom in here, and this crosshair on there will also be lined up perfectly. If it wasn't lined up, you'd see something like that. So I'll just undo that and turn those back on. So you can use the orange snapping lines to help you snap it into place and to know, and then this is like a little extra verification, and if you start to see things off here, you'll know that you need to wind it back a few steps and put it back in place again. On this layer here, I'm going to tap invert so that I know which layer is which. So the purple one will be the one that I'm working on, and these bits around the outside are the ones that I don't need to work with. They're just there so I know what's lining up with what. So now I can draw something in this area here, knowing exactly how far down here I can go. So I'm going to put another motif in here now. Again, just using these loose circle shapes for the outlines at this stage. And now that one is in there, I can also put that one down here. So I'm going to duplicate this bottom layer again, tap transform, and I'm going to snap it down into this bottom corner here, looking for those orange lines there. Duplicate again, and I can put it up in this corner as well, looking out for those orange lines there. Duplicate again. Bring that one up here. There's nothing in that corner on this layer, which is why there's nothing up there at the moment. But you can also bring this one down into that corner. So I've put it into all four corners. I'll get rid of this first green one. So that's what we have at the moment. The top four layers you can pinch together. So we've got these outside parts on one layer and then this on another. And then I'm going to invert those colours again so we can see which is the one we're working with. So now we can go back down to this bottom one here and carry on sketching on this layer now and fit something in this place. And then once that's in place, I'm going to duplicate this again. Snap one down there. Duplicate again. There's no new parts on there, so I will just bring that one straight up to here. You can see there's a part of it on there. And then we can put one in this corner as well. Duplicate and bring that one up here. Then hide this one so that we know which ones we're working with, and it's these three here that we've just made. I'm going to pinch those together and invert the colours on those, and then we can merge it together with the rest of the green. Put this one back on. Now we're at the stage we want to be able to draw off the edges of this, so it would be nice to start here and carry on onto this part, which is that part there. The way to do that is tap on this layer, duplicate, tap transform and snap that over to this side, so you've got those orange lines there. Then the other one I'm going to drag over to this side and snap that into place. Zoom into the middle and make sure you've got this little crosshair there lined up, and then you know those are in the right place and you can pinch those together. Then this green one, duplicate that as well, tap transform and bring this over to this side. And then this one underneath, tap transform and bring that over to this side, checking your orange lines there. And when you zoom into the middle, because we inverted the colours on this one, you should see that white crosshair lining up there. And then you know everything is in the right place. You can pinch those together. And instead of a diamond now, you're going to see an X. We've brought the edges of that diamond into the middle, so we can draw completely over this part here, going from one tile onto the next one. So making sure that you're on the bottom one, the purple one, I'm going to draw one last flower in here now. And I think it's probably going to be easier if I start by drawing the flowers first and then trying to line up with them. And I think if I make this one shorter, so I'll erase this, and this is where this method really comes into its own. You can adjust your layout so that you have room for everything you want to put in there. So let's put one there. That will come up like that. Could have a leaf there. Connect that one up there. And I think I'm going to put this one a bit further up there. It's overlapping there, but when we go back and put this back into a diamond formation, we can correct that layout. That's one of the strengths of working this way. If you spot any other bits while you're working that you feel like you want to change, you can do that as well. So this one here, I think I might erase this and make that a little bit further down to there. And then these leaves can come out a bit further. So now we've got this extra part in there. We can delete this green one, duplicate this one, tap transform, snap it back over to this side, and then this one we can snap back over to this side. You can see here that all of those are back in the right place, so you can pinch that together, and then we can do the offset to put this around the outside. You can see now we've got this whole tile filled out by just having drawn the bits in the middle. I'm going to pinch the top four together, invert the colour on those so we can see what's what. And this one here, this is the new one we just drew, so we want to change this purple one to fit in that space a bit better now. So I'm going to erase this, and then I can redraw this motif, maybe erase a bit of that as well. To go there. And here where I made a bit more room with this flower, I can take these leaves down a bit more as well. This leaf can extend a bit further down there into that gap we've made. So once you're at this stage where you have all of your motifs in place, this is where you can finesse and play with the layout a bit. After you've made any changes on this working layer, you would then need to delete the top layer and put this around the outside again so you can see things in their new positions. So each time I'm duplicating it and snapping it into the corners, checking for those orange lines each time. You can also get a preview of your whole pattern in Repeat to see how it's looking in a smaller scale but on a wider canvas. So to do that, we're going to swipe down with 3 fingers, tap copy all, come right up to the top here, swipe down again with 3 fingers and tap paste. That's now pasted a copy of everything in there. Tap transform on this layer and we're going to snap this up into the middle until that says 1800 pixels there. You can duplicate, tap transform and snap it into this corner and you'll see it repeats the tile across like that. I'm going to pinch those two together, duplicate and snap those down to the bottom. So now this is what the pattern is going to look like in repeat, and this is a good opportunity to see if there's any kind of big gaps that stand out once it's in repeat, or areas which have too many motifs in there compared to the rest. I think that's overall looking okay. Like these ones kind of look darker, but that's because I've gone over them a few more times with the scribbling. I think I'm happy with the balance and the layout of the flowers compared to the leaves, so I'm going to get rid of those and start working a bit more on the details on this now. So I'll invert the colours on this one and go back down to the sketch diamond. So you can either freehand the flowers or you can use stamp brushes. I love using stamp brushes in my work because I like the uniformity that it gives. So if you want to go freehand, what I would do is add a layer above this. There's nothing on this layer, and then you could then just freehand some flowers in your spots like this to then trace over in the next stage, making sure you stick within the boundaries you've set yourself. And then on this layer underneath, grab your eraser, and if you want to, you can just tidy these up like that a little bit to make it easier for tracing over. What I'm going to do though is use stamp brushes. So I'll tap on this layer and clear it, and I'm going to use this flower brush here, which I'll make available as a free download along with this palette that I'm using today. And on this layer above, I'm just going to stamp this flower shape into each of these purple circles. We don't need to put it in the green ones, they'll be made when we duplicate. So I'm just going to stamp this into each one of those, and then I can go to this layer underneath, and just to tidy things up, I'm going to erase these parts. Then I'm going to merge the 2 purple layers together, so the flower shapes down with the stems. And then we're going to perform that duplicate and offset to make the flower shapes fill these as well. Then I'm going to pinch those 4 duplicated purple layers together and delete the previous green one. Tap on this one and invert the colours. And so that is now the basic layout for our pattern done. We've finished all our sketching, everything's in the right place, and we're ready to trace over this in the pattern folder. So I'm going to turn on the pattern layer. We're going to start working in this layer here. I'm going to reduce the opacity on these. All we have to trace over is these purple ones. I'm going to start with the stems, I think, and I'm going to make those in this blue colour. And brush wise, I'm going to use the tracing crayon that comes with this set. This is a little hard to see over that one, so I think I'm going to make the blend mode on this sketching layer linear burn, or maybe even, is there anything else that's going to, let's go for this one. I'll try add. I think that's going to make it easiest to see over the top of that. So I'm just going to trace over these flower shapes. So I'm going to use this sketch layer underneath as my reference for these more smooth strokes that I'm making now. This part here on the edge, we're going to draw later in the extra group. If you have motifs where you had to bring the edges into the middle to draw them, those will be done in the extra group, and it's just intact motifs that we do in this pattern group. So that's all of the stems we can do on this one. Now I'm going to go and add a layer underneath and draw the leaves. And if you're wondering what these pattern markers for, and these, partly it's so that you can see which layer I'm working on the screen as I do the screen recording, but also they serve a practical purpose as well. It helps you keep track of which way your pattern is supposed to go up. So for example, sometimes when you draw, you can end up like this. You can see which way your pattern is, but the main function is that it allows you to add layers from the bottom up. So where I've done this one, I want to add a layer underneath. I can just tap on this bottom layer and add a layer underneath. If I didn't have that one, you'd always be having to add layers on top and then drag them underneath each time. So that is the main function of this pattern, is that by having those at the bottom of the group, you can always tap on the unused bottom layer and add a layer to the very bottom, just in case you were wondering. So I'm going to go on this layer and I'm going to draw some leaves now. And initially I'm going to use the same colour, but we're going to do something slightly different with this one in a bit. So I'm just going to trace over this and add my leaf shapes in now. Then I'm going to use colour drop to fill these. So I'm going to tap on this colour up there, drag it over there, and I'm going to put my threshold at about 94%. Continue filling and tap on each one of these. You can see I've missed one there. Let's draw that one in. I don't think I ever draw a set of leaves or petals without forgetting to fill one of them in. There we go. Now to add some contrast between the stems and the leaves, what I'm going to do is use a blend mode to change the colour of this top one. So on this top layer here, I'm going to add a layer above, and I'm going to go to my disc, double tap over here, and this is going to give me a 50% grey. If we go to the value of it, you'll see its brightness is 50%, saturation 0, and all of these RGB sliders are in the middle. So that's a 50% grey. What I'm going to do is tap on this layer here and fill layer. Then I'm going to tap on this layer again and make it a clipping mask, and it's clipped that whole layer down to what's underneath, so it's only covering the pixel on that layer, and therefore that's why they're grey. What I'm going to do now is tap on this blend mode and change it to colour burn. And what colour burn does is it uses this layer to change the saturation and darkness of the layer below, and so makes the blue kind of darker and more intense. We can change the effect of that by changing the opacity of this grey layer. So I'm going to change it to, I'm going to go for 40%. And that mostly is how I do all my shading in Procreate for patterns. I'll use these grey colour burn layers, and then you don't have to use a separate colour for the shading. And if you want to change colours of your pattern later, it's really easy. Just alpha lock the layer underneath. Could go for this pink colour. You can fill that. I'll fill this one as well, and then we've changed the colours and the shading will automatically always match everything. So that's the colour I'm going to use for the stems, which is the same blue but with a colour burn of 40% over the top of it. Next thing I'm going to draw is the flower middles. So I'm going to add a layer above now and draw these flower middles in. I'm going to draw a circle shape, hold, and then tap with my finger and release, and that's going to give you a perfect circle there. I will do these ones on this layer because these parts aren't cut off at the edge. Then I'm going to fill these in as well. Then I'm going to add a layer underneath this and draw in the flower petals. Then I'm going to fill these with colour drop. At the moment I've got one colour per layer. This one, I do want to change the colours of the flowers, but to make shading easier, I want to leave them all on the same layer. So I'm going to alpha lock this one, and I'm going to use the colouring crayon, and I'm going to use this to just scribble over and change the colours of some of these. If you wanted to put them on different layers, you could do that, but I think in this instance, I'm just going to leave them all on the same layer. So that's all the illustration done now for the pattern folder. What I'm going to do now is we'll put this in place for the extra group. First of all, I'm going to turn the textures off. I'm going to swipe down with 3 fingers and copy all. I'm going to turn my extra group on. You'll see the marker there. Tap on that layer, swipe down with 3 fingers again and paste. And then that's put a flattened copy of everything in there for us. Turn the pattern layer and the sketch layer off, so that's just put this flattened layer of everything in there. What I'm going to do is duplicate this layer, tap transform, and I'm going to snap half of it over to this side, making sure we've got those orange lines there, and then this one I'm going to snap over to this side. Then I can pinch and merge those together, and now we zoom in. Where we drew this part in, we had that X instead of the diamond. We've now got the X in the middle here. And this part here is what we need to draw in. It would kind of be useful if we had this part filled in as well. That's there, so that I know exactly how far I can go down with that. So what I'm going to do is duplicate this one, tap transform, and then I'm going to put this down into this corner here. See, that's snapped into place there, and you'll see now we've got that leaf there. I'm going to duplicate this bottom one again and bring this one down there, and there we go. We can sketch all of this in now, knowing exactly how far down we can go with each one. What I'm going to do is pinch these top 2 together and change the blend mode on this one to multiply so that I can still see what's underneath. Then I can pinch all of that down onto one layer. I'm going to add a layer above, and now I can sketch these leaves and stalks in here. So grab this colour again, and then I can draw this in here, making sure I'm using the right brush, of course. Then we can add our layer above, fill it with that 50% grey again. Tap on the layer, make it a clipping mask, and change the blend mode to colour burn 40%. Then tap on this layer here, add a layer in, and we can draw the leaves in now. And it's so nice knowing that we're not going to have to move any of this around. This is all drawn in its final place, and these lovely textured edges are going to stay nice and crisp and clean. I'll give you a little tip now for filling in these little halos that you get with a textured brush. You can go around and just draw over them like that, but if you want to do everything on the layer all at the same time, here's a tip. Duplicate this layer. On the one we've just duplicated, tap on your adjustments, go to Gaussian blur, swipe along or drag along, and just put a Gaussian blur of 3% on there. You can see that's gone slightly fuzzy on the edge now. Then what we want to do is hide this layer. So we've hidden the blurred layer. Still on this layer that we've hidden, tap select, and you want automatic as your select mode, and tap on any of the negative space here. Use your threshold slider to bring it in almost up to where you can see that gap in there. Tap on invert, go to layers, add a layer, tap on this, and then fill it. And if I hide the original layer underneath, you can see what that's done. It's selected that area that was just inside the gap, and it's filled it with colour, so that covers over these gaps here. So then, as long as you've got this blurred layer hidden, that must be hidden, you can pinch all three of those together and you've now got all of the gaps on that layer filled. I've got a whole separate video on how to do that, which goes into it with a bit more depth, and I'll link to that one at the end of this video, but I just wanted to show you it quickly here. So now we've got all of the extra parts illustrated on this. We can hide our extra group, we'll come back to that later, and we can start to add in some shading on our pattern now. So I'll start by turning the textures on, because it's always good to have the textures on as you're working so that you know how the final thing is going to look. And I'm going to use this colour burn technique for doing the shading on this as well. So first of all, we'll start with the leaves. I'm going to add a layer above, tap on it, make it a clipping mask, and I'm going to use this 50% grey, and I will use my gradient texture large for this. Tap on the blend mode and make it colour burn 40%. Doesn't matter if it's like 39 or 41, as long as it's somewhere around 40 it'll be fine. And then I'm just going to use that brush to add a bit of darker colour at the bottom of these leaves like that. And by using colour burn, you'll know that you'll always be shading in a texture that will perfectly match everything else you're drawing. Now I want to make the edges a bit lighter, so I'm going to tap back onto the leaves, add another layer. I'm going to make the blend mode of this colour dodge and 40% opacity. And then with this same grey colour, I can draw onto the tops of the leaves like that and make these top edges a little bit lighter. And again, you know you're going to get a shade that perfectly matches what you have underneath. And if you decide you want to recolour the pattern later, so I'll tap on this layer, tap up here, go on hue, saturation and brightness. You can make this any colour you like and that shading will match perfectly. And that's why I love using this as a shading option. One last thing I'm going to do with these, I'm going to grab the speckles and just scribble over both of these layers. So I'll start on the colour dodge and this will add some light speckles to underneath. You can see there we've got this speckledy texture coming in, and then I'm going to do the same on the colour burn layer. And that's just put a little bit of extra noise and texture on there. I'll group these together and we'll name this one leaves. This will make it easier for navigating and recolouring later if you name and group stuff. So we'll work on the stems now. We've already got the colour burn making them darker. What I'm going to do is add another colour burn layer underneath. So we'll make this one colour burn 40%. Go back to, I'll use the gradient texture small for this one, and I'm going to draw a little bit of shadow just underneath where the stems come out from underneath the petals. And we could also add a bit of the speckles on this layer as well, and then we can add another layer, make this one colour dodge 40%, and add some of those lighter speckles to the stems too. You can see we've got some of those lighter colours coming in there. And then again I'll group all of this. You can name this one stems. Now we come on to the flower petals, and this is why I wanted this all on one layer, is because I would have to do all of that shading over each of those colours, and seeing as none of these are touching each other anyway, it's okay to have it all on the same layer. If you want to keep all your colours on different layers though, you would need to repeat this for each layer. So I'm going to add a layer above all of this, make it a clipping mask, and we'll do the darker bits first, so colour burn 40%, and I think I'll use the shading crayon for this. So what I'm going to do is just add a little bit of shadow coming out from the middle under the centre like that. Then I'm going to add another layer, make this one colour dodge 40%, and then I would use this on the tops of the petals like that. And then again use this speckles over each of those layers. And I'm going to repeat that for each of these flowers now. Now the last bit of shading to do on this is just to these flower middles. So I'll just quickly group and name these. Add a layer above this, make it colour burn and 40%. Clip it down. I'm going to use the gradient texture small, and I'm just going to add a little bit of darker colour to the bottoms of these. Like that. I'll come back and do the rest in a second, and then I'm going to add a layer in between these. It will automatically get clipped down. This one will be colour dodge 40%, and I'm going to put this lighter colour on the opposite corners. Not that circles have corners, but you know what I mean. So we've got like darker on the bottom here and lighter on the top, and then again scribble over both of those with the speckles brush. And then I'm going to repeat that for all the others as well. So that's all the shading on this completed now. We just need to go and repeat the stem and leaf shading in this extra group. So I'll hide that one, show this one, and we just need to repeat all of that shading on here now. And then on the stems, just add a layer above that. And remember, we did colour burn 40, and I used gradient texture small just to add a little bit of darkness where these will be underneath the stems when we put the pattern together. Sorry, underneath the petals when we put the pattern together. There we go, and that is all of the illustration for this pattern done now. Next job is to start putting this together and building out the tile. So now for the fun part, we can build out our finished tile. This part can either be done in software like Photoshop or Affinity Photo if you're into automations and want to use your tile as a pattern swatch for applying to larger areas. More info on that in the description. But you'll be happy to know that it is also perfectly legit to do the whole thing in Procreate. You don't need any other software if you don't want to, and you'll still have a perfect pattern tile at the end. Remember I said this was a non-destructive method? We're going to keep a copy of everything to be able to go back to. So this extra group here, where it's currently in the middle, and we're going to put it on the edges, we're going to keep this all intact here, and everything is going to be done by copying layers. So let's first of all start by getting this motif back on the edges. I'll hide the pattern so you can see, and if I hide these two, you'll see it's just this here that we need to put back in place on the edges. I'll put the sketch on actually so you can see what it's going to line up with. So I've hidden this one that we were using as a guide to trace over, and I've also hidden the extra group. I'm going to collapse down my extra group, swipe left on it and duplicate the whole group. Then I'm going to tap on this and flatten. If you find that you don't have enough spare layers to be able to duplicate the whole group, don't worry, I'll cover that in a minute. Let's just drag that up here, hide this whole group and turn that off for now. I'm going to take the alpha lock off this and use my colouring crayon, use a nice bright colour here so you can see it, and I'm going to put a mark going off each of the corners there. It needs to go all the way off the edges on those two corners. Duplicate this layer, tap transform, and this is where it's going to get cut in half on the edges to put it back in its right place, but it's okay because we've still got the group there with it all in the middle. So then this one underneath, we can snap that over to that edge, making sure that your orange lines are telling you that it's snapped into place. This one is where it's really important that everything is in the right place, because this is for your final pattern. So once those are in, you can pinch those together and we can erase these markers there. And then if I turn the layers back on, you can see from our sketch layer that this is now back in its right place. Let's turn the layers, the extra group off. You can see this is back in its right place on the edges, but we've still got the layered version of it there to go back to. So that's in place. The next thing we need to do is duplicate all this. If you don't have enough layers to be able to duplicate a whole group like that, don't worry, we can still work with this. Let me just delete that. Turn your background colour off, your sketch off, the bit at the top off, and your textures off. So you just have this pattern group showing. Make sure you hide this marker. And then with just this pattern group showing, swipe down with 3 fingers and copy all. Then you can hide all of this, tap on this bit we've just pasted in, the extra part there, swipe down with 3 fingers again and paste. And that's then done the same thing as duplicating the whole group and flattening it, but we didn't need to have all of those layers duplicated. If you're really struggling with layers, odds are you're probably not going to be able to build out the rest of this. So what you can also do is come out into your gallery, duplicate this file, keep this one as your layered, so I would change the name of this one, I'll just call it flower pattern layers, and then call this flower pattern flat, something like that. You could then stack these together, and then this flattened one, because you know you've got the other file with all the layers in it, what you can do is you can just tap on your pattern, make sure you've got that marker hidden, and you can just flatten all of these groups, knowing that you've got them intact in the other file. So then your extra, you just need to make sure you get rid of these or hide them, and then you could flatten that one, and then you need to put that back on the edges the same as we did in the other one. I'm going to come out of this one and I'll go back to working in this one with the layers. So I've got all of this layered folder here hidden, and that's going to make it easier for snapping things. If you've got items on other layers showing, when you try and snap things, they will also snap to other layers. So if you're having a hard time snapping things into the corners, make sure that all of this layers group is hidden. So now what we need to do is make sure that you have these in the right order. If you have your extra group on top, you're going to see these flower stalks on the top of the flowers. So make sure that you've got everything in the right order, and then you can merge these together. Then we need to draw those marks again. Then we can duplicate this layer, and then what we're going to do is offset it into the corners the same as we did when we were working with our sketch layers. So tap transform, drag it down and to the left, making really sure that you've got those orange lines there. Then duplicate this bottom one again, drag it up, making sure you have those orange lines each time, and into the left. Then duplicate the bottom one again, take it up and across to the right, checking you've got your orange lines. Then duplicate down and to the right, making sure you've got those orange lines there. Then these top 4, you can pinch those together, erase these marks in the middle, and then on this bottom one, erase the corner marks. So then that is your finished pattern tile. You can pinch these 2 together there, and you've still got all of these layers here intact. If you did this and then spotted something that was wrong, all you'd need to do is get rid of this, go back to your pattern, make a quick change to that, copy and offset everything again, and then you'd have your new pattern tile there. That's why I love this method, because you get to see a finished pattern tile with everything flattened here, but all of your layers are still here for editing or colour changes if you spot anything you want to change, and then you would just need to repeat that last step of building out the tile with the flattened copies again, which I promise you will very soon become muscle memory and you'll be able to do it in less than a minute. Let's take a little look at this textures folder now and look at how you can customize things in there. At the moment, this whole group is locked, so if you don't want to change anything, you won't be able to do it by accident. But if you do want to change things, you can tap on unlock, and then on these layers here, you can edit the opacity and the blend modes if you want to. And if you want to put them back to their original state, the clues to do that are in the layer names. So CB67 means color burn 67. So if you wanted to change this the opacity of this, have it less intense, you can bring it all the way down, or if you want it more intense, you can bring it all the way up. And if you want to put it back to what it was before, you just look at the layer name and put it back to 67. This one is a nice one to play around with, this paper texture here. You can have it less or more intense if you like more of these speckles. This one will really darken it up, and that's why this one is only at 13%. And this overlay one here will also make quite a big difference to the pattern. So if you want to change and customize these, don't be scared to have a play around with the blend modes, knowing that you can always put them back how they were originally. I'm going to lock that so it's back how it's supposed to be, and now we're going to test that this pattern is working in repeat. So start by taking a snapshot of your tile by swiping down with 3 fingers and copy all. On this top layer here, swipe down again with 3 fingers and tap paste. And that's put that flattened copy of everything in there now. Add a layer underneath in a colour that contrasts with most of the colours in your pattern. This background is quite a light one, so I'm going to put a dark colour in. I'll double tap down here to get black, and I'm going to fill this layer with black. If there's any gaps in the sides of the pattern, that black will show through and we'll be able to see it. So tap on this layer here, tap transform, and snap this up to the middle there until it says 1800 pixels. Then we can duplicate this, tap transform, and snap it over there. Then we can zoom into the middle here, show and hide this, and just pan up and down this seam and make sure that you've got no gaps in there. If you see a gap like this where it runs down the whole of your motifs and background, that means that you didn't quite snap this one up into the middle. So you would just undo to this stage again, tap transform, make sure you've got snapping and magnetics on, and then snap this to 1800 pixels and just really make sure that that says 1800 there. Then duplicate and snap it over to the edge, and then that will be gone. If you're seeing errors where the background matches up but you've got gaps where the motifs don't quite match up, that would mean that you made a mistake somewhere with the snapping when you were at, if I go back to this one, when you were either at this stage putting that on the edges, depending on if it's that motif, or when you flatten this and duplicated this around into the corners. So you'd roll back to this stage if you're seeing something wrong with the motifs lining up, duplicate the extra group, put that back on the edges, and then move this around into the corners. So those are the 2 errors you might see at this stage. If it's a line going through the whole of the pattern, the background and the motifs, then it'll be just because you didn't resize this to 1800 pixels to drag across to there. If it's motifs, you need to rewind to putting the extra parts back on the edges and then rebuilding your tile again. But this is looking okay, so we can pinch those together, duplicate, and drag that down to the bottom, snapping it into place. And this is where we check the horizontal seams, so the top and the bottom seams. And again, show and hide this, pan across and make sure that that's looking okay, and that's looking lovely. So what we can do now is pinch those together, and that's how our pattern is looking in repeat. If you enjoyed this tutorial and want to see even more like this, I have a whole bunch of tutorials for making patterns just like this in Procreate, and you can find those in a beginner playlist over on my channel. Lots of them have free palettes and free stamp brushes to go with them, and the free resources can all be downloaded from the Pattern Makers Toolkit on my website, and you can find the Pattern Maker canvas and brush set over in my Etsy store, where Pattern Makers Toolkit members can enjoy an exclusive 10% off everything. The Pattern Makers Toolkit is kind of like a free Patreon. You'll get a monthly email with creative prompts, seasonal colour palettes, early access to some of my YouTube videos, 10% off in my Etsy store, and a full library of free pattern making resources. It's just one email a month, no spam, and just goodies to help you stay creative. If you want to find out more about combining these Procreate patterns with software like Photoshop or Affinity Photo to supercharge your workflow, then you should check out my more in-depth classes over on Skillshare, and if you're not a member, you can get 1 month for free when you sign up with this link. Don't forget to subscribe for weekly tutorials just like this one. Have fun, stay creative, and I will see you soon.